Welcome back to another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck, and today we are in Perryville, Kentucky, and I'm joined by Robbie Mays. Robbie, thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
So here on this beautiful day, let's talk about when Perryville was settled. When was it founded?
Well, it was about, there was two trips from Virginia made by James Harrod in 1750 and 1758. And the second trip was to the bluegrass areas in Kentucky. The first trip was to the mountains. James Harrod stopped in Harrodsburg, what is now Harrodsburg, and built Fort Harrod. And the Walkers, the Harbesons, the Potts, the Ewings, and the Harbesons came on to Perryville, on south. And of course they found the river, they found two roads that crossed, and it was called Harbeson's Crossroad to begin with. Several names, Harbeson Station, Chaplain Hills, but they found the cave behind us.
Yeah.
And that was the shelter until they got the fort built, which was around the cave. So unofficially about 1758.
Wow. Merchants Row is right behind us, but it wasn't always Merchants Row, right? Can you talk about the history there?
All right. When they started laying out the town, there was a street on both sides of the river. It was called Crop Street.
Yeah.
And that's where all the farmers came to town to sell their produce to the merchants. As the other side of the east side of the Chaplain River filled up with larger buildings, basically, Merchants Row was kind of between the road and the river. So there was extra space and they needed retail space, so James Burton did most of the construction on Merchants Row. And they started putting the smaller stores over here on the west side of the river.
Right.
And that filled in otherwise useless space. So Merchants Row, all those buildings were built by Burton in 1830, 1835.
And still very much a working retail road today, really.
Right,
I mean,
right now the everything is rented on that side of the road. It's been restored, partially restored, in the process of being restored and rented, except on the east side of the road. There are three buildings on this side: Dr. Polk's house, office, and the Carrick Parks house, which are being renovated sometime in the near future.
Robbie, what effects did the Battle of Perrysville have on the community?
A lot.
Okay.
Really, a lot. The town basically on the night before, because the troops were coming through, stragglers from the south mainly. The north was northern troops were about 2 miles west of Perryville and finally got to town. The park is about 2 miles from here.
Okay.
So Perryville wasn't in the main part of the fighting.
Right.
The Carrick Parks house here to our right was taken over by the officers and the doctors. The soldiers, if they slept on the sidewalk.
Wow.
The building that the Welcome Center is in received a cannonball through the roof and through an upstairs bedroom door. So the town got a little bit of fire and conflict. There was some street fighting that went on from groups who were scouting out the other side. But basically the night before, on the 7th, it was like a ghost town because the population had gotten word that there was going to be a battle, conflict, and everybody either hid out or left town. After that, the battle was over, and the unique part, I think, of the battle was a lot of Civil War battles had a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
This one had 7,560 killed, wounded, and missing. But that was in like a 4.5-hour period. Most of the big battles with the big deaths were 4 days of fighting. this was 4 hours, maybe 5.
That's an epic number.
Yeah, horrific for that many in a short period of time.
Yeah.
And most of the properties that Elmwood Inn, I'm sitting here looking at Elmwood Inn and Harmonia College, and any of the big houses were basically taken over for hospitals. From here all the way back to Indiana, as far as that goes. And a lot of them were taken to Harrisburg. There was the gentleman owned a stable in Danville that they cleaned out and put 250 wounded in there. So basically, Perryville was affected a little by the fighting, but most of the effect was after the battle and being used as a hospital, because everything that had shelter to it, barns, whatever,
it all got used for that.
Were used for hospitals.
Wow. So I was going to ask you, the next question I was going to ask you about some of the prominent people in Perryville, but here's my question first, and I just want to make sure that we give him his due. Polk. I've heard you say that name now before.
Yeah.
How big was he in that battle?
Dr. Polk?
Dr. Polk, yeah.
Dr. Polk served the public for several years here. He was a preacher, a temperance speaker. He delivered 826 babies. He had 1,535 sermons or temperance talks.
Sounds like a great guy.
He was actually retired when the battle came on, because he was getting old. He was very tall and stooped over, had a long beard.
Nice.
But they pulled him out of retirement because he a doctor, he couldn't let people die without helping them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he actually, I say he actually worked himself to death, because he wasn't in good health when he did. And all the people that were housed in barns, and it was October.
Oh yeah.
And we're sitting here in the cool today.
Right.
So and he died shortly after, a couple years after the battle.
Okay. Just from the very few things I can pick up from him, I don't know if he would have wanted it any other way. But so thank you for touching on him. Let's talk about some of the other prominent people in Perryville.
Okay. I think J.A. Burton could be a prominent citizen, because a lot of the Merchants Row he built, and he was certainly a prominent citizen of Perryville. And I'm not sure who built. I just know there's 2 or 3 houses in Perryville that some's over on the east side that look almost like the ones on the west side. And at the time of the battle, there was like 304 people populated in Perryville. So there wasn't too many builders, and each builder, probably a couple maybe, that had their own favorite things to build. Okay. So when you go over on the east side, there's a house. When you go over on the west side, there's a house that looks almost like that.
Very similar. Okay.
Yeah, so he was a prominent. Of course, the founders, Laura Parks, W.H. Parks was her father, ran the Parks dry goods store in the same family for about 100 years. And then Laura took over after he died. That wasn't a popular thing to do back in those days, for a lady to run a store.
Yeah, that's right.
But she decided she was going to do it, and she did. And we have, when she left out of the store, she locked the door. Didn't feel good, went home, and shortly after that passed away.
Really?
And the everything she had in the store was locked in the store. And we still have that today, and we're in the process of redoing that store, and we've had to move all that stuff around, and it's quite a bit of stuff. But she ran it for years and years and years.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, how about this? This is interesting. Education. Does this community have a history of the business of education?
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
We're looking at one right across the street. There was 3 colleges here during the 1800s. Harmonia College was on the Danville Road, and it was privately owned for years and years, and got in such bad shape when a fellow purchased it to restore it. There wasn't enough there left to restore, so he had to tear that down. But we're looking across the river, Chaplain River, at Elmwood Inn, and that was Elmwood Academy at the time.
Okay.
My grandmother went there. Professor T.C. Pointer was the teacher, and Blanche Griffin, his niece, was the music teacher. Up behind us, behind the cave and up on the hill, was the Ewing Institute. And that's been purchased by a private individual and redone. And the Ewing Institute served all the way up to 1915 when they built the elementary school up on the Springfield Hill. The night before the battle, General Bragg was going to Harrisburg, going to Frankfort for installing a Confederate governor. And he ate supper at Ewing Institute, and all the girls at the Institute serenaded him as he rode by to go to Frankfort. I think the tuition there too, they had voice singing, they had seamstress work, all kinds of lady-like things. And it was 6 weeks was $38 tuition.
6 weeks was $38?
Yes, ma'am.
That's
so those were the three higher education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robbie, when was Perryville put on the National Register of Historic Places?
1974.
1974.
Right. There's
okay.
probably coursers. I mean, you can look at the Elmwood Inn. We're sitting at the Carrick Parks House, Merchants Row. You figure all of that is old enough to be on the register. There's actually about 90 houses in Perryville that could be, if they wanted to be, included on the register.
That's impressive.
They've been covered up with siding, and some of them are bricked up. But when you get into the bones of the house, they were ancient, you know.
Very impressive. You said about 90 in the town. Wow. Okay, how about this? What do you do when you come to Perryville? I know my first stop was actually at like this little marketplace. I thought it looked very interesting. I was very early, but so they sell things there, and they kind of go like around a holiday. But I know there's so many other interesting things around the town. Tell us what there is to do.
Okay. A lot to do, actually, if you get into it. If you stop by the Welcome Center, which is on the corner of 68 and 150, I'll probably be there, and Vicki will be there, and we'll give you some information. And there's a walking trail around town to see some of the houses that you'll probably see on the show. There's Merchants Row. There's the biggest attraction, I think, on Merchants Row right now is the privately owned part of the row, which is an antique shop.
Yeah,
and
I saw wedding dresses, photography, antiques. I was like, wow, I could get lost here.
Exactly. And people actually come there on a regular basis, and that is owned and operated by John and Sylvia Hensley, who bought the Ewing Institute and redid it and bought the house next door and turned that into an Airbnb.
Oh,
and
an Airbnb.
Yeah, nice. Kelly and Adam Gray own the Mud House, which...
That's who I ran into this morning. She's great.
Right.
Yeah.
They own the Mud House, and they have actually redone that beautifully, and the Bond property, too.
Yep.
Where the old Southern Roller Mill was. They've redone that. But the Mud House, they've left out a section of wall because it was actually the insulation. That's why they call it the Mud House. The insulation was mud packed in the walls before they completed the house. And there's she has Marketplace Gray over there.
Yep.
On 68.
That was all right. That's what I was talking about.
Right.
Okay. Thank you for naming it, because I wrote it down but had since forgotten. Great.
That's where it is, and that's nice. And then S&A covers actually a block.
Okay.
And that's they buy estates and resell the property. So there's antiques and all kinds of, I don't even know how to tell you what kind of varieties in there.
Yeah.
But about everything that a person might want in that store.
That's right across from the marathon, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that place looked really neat.
Yeah.
Treasures galore in there. I mean, and this is where I think people would come who have like a true taste for antique and classic design. Like this is one of the places that you come in the country to get that stuff.
And we have some people that come and they are interested in the history, or they're tracking down ancestors who fought in the battle here or whatever, or they want to go to the park, which is a couple miles out the road, and they've got 20-something miles of trails, and the wife could be less interested. So she can go to the antique shop while he's out walking the trails with the kids. You
exactly.
know? And it works well that way.
Yeah, very
But there's
well.
all kinds of things to do. And the deeper you dig, the more stuff you find to do.
Robbie, today was excellent getting to sit down with you. Thank you for telling us about this unbelievable place. I'm sure our viewers are so going to enjoy this. And when they get here, they're going to pop by the Welcome Center, right? So that they can do this walking tour.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
like that's epic.
Right.
All
And
right.
there's a small museum in there, and there's also a historical library.
Okay. All right. Well, we're looking forward to that.
All right.
Thank you for watching another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck, here today in Perryville, Kentucky. Robbie Mays, thank you again for having us here today.
You are welcome. We're glad to have you, and we'll be glad to have people come by and see us.
Very much so. And remember, travel slowly and stop often. Bye for now.